Commander Lee Hana pushed open the heavy metal door that had protected her people for 200 years. The rusty hinges screamed in protest as sunlight touched her face for the first time in her life. She had only seen the surface world in old photographs and faded videos, but nothing had prepared her for this sight. The air tasted wrong. It burned her throat even through the breathing mask, carrying the metallic smell of decay and something else she could not name. Above her, the sky was not the blue her grandmother had described in bedtime stories. Instead, it glowed with a sickly yellow color, like old parchment stained with age. "Stay close," she whispered to the 11 people behind her. Captain Park. Juno stepped up beside her, his weapon ready. Behind them came Dr. Kim Sora with her scanning equipment, and young Lieutenant Cho Woo Jin, whose hands shook with excitement and fear. They had lived their entire lives in the underground bunkers, eating food grown in artificial light and breathing recycled air. Their grandparents had built these shelters when the aliens first came to Earth. The Kethmari Collective had announced that humans were a disease that needed to be removed from the galaxy. Then they had begun killing everyone they could find. The rear team moved carefully through what had once been the great city of Seoul. Twisted pieces of metal stuck up from the ground like broken teeth. Buildings had collapsed into themselves, leaving only concrete skeletons reaching toward the poisoned sky. Weeds and strange plants grew through cracks in the pavement, but they looked wrong somehow, their leaves too dark and their stems too thick. "The radiation meter is beeping," Park Juno said quietly. "But we should be safe for a few hours with these suits." Hana nodded and kept walking. Every step took them deeper into the graveyard of their civilization. She tried to imagine millions of people walking these streets, driving cars, living normal lives. It seemed impossible now. The silence was complete except for the wind whistling through empty windows. Dr. Sora stopped suddenly and knelt beside a strange object half buried under broken concrete. It was made of a material that seemed to shift between silver and black, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. "This is their technology," she said, running her scanner over the device. "But look at these readings. No power signature, no maintenance signals. This thing has been dead for decades." "What does that mean?" Lieutenant Cho asked. "It means they left," Hana replied, feeling a mixture of relief and anger. The Kethmari finished their work and moved on to destroy someone else. They continued exploring for hours, finding more evidence that their enemies had abandoned Earth long ago. The alien machines that had poisoned the air were breaking down. The atmospheric processors that had turned breathable air into toxic soup were finally failing after centuries of neglect. As the day grew darker, they climbed to the top of a collapsed overpass to get a better view of the area. From this height, Hana could see for kilometers in every direction. The destruction stretched to the horizon, but here and there she spotted something that made her heart beat faster. Small lights flickered in the distance. Not the harsh glow of alien technology, but the warm yellow light of human settlements. They were not alone. "Commander," Dr. Sora called from below. Her voice was excited. "You need to see this." Hana climbed down to find Sora standing beside what looked like a communications array, one of the few pieces of human technology that had survived the invasion. The device was old but still functional, its solar panels cracked but working. "It has been broadcasting automatically for years," Sora explained. "Just a simple message on repeat, hoping someone would hear it." She activated the playback function, and a voice filled with static spoke from the speakers. "To any human survivors on Earth, this is Captain Yoon Dae-ho of the human space service vessel Perseverance. We escaped during the early days of the invasion. We are alive. We remember what they did to our world. We have been preparing. We are coming home." The message was dated 3 months ago. Lieutenant Cho stared at the device with wide eyes. "There, are humans in space? They survived?" "More than survived," Hana said, studying the technical data attached to the transmission. "This signal came from beyond the outer planets. They have been out there all this time, building ships, gathering strength." Park Juno checked his watch. "We need to get back to the bunker before dark. The radiation levels increase at night." As they made their way back through the ruins, Hana felt something she had never experienced before. Hope. For her entire life, she had believed that the few thousand people in the underground shelters were all that remained of humanity. They had talked about rebuilding, but it had seemed impossible. Now everything was different. Humans had survived in space, and they were coming back. Earth had other survivors hiding in bunkers and settlements across the globe. The Kethmari were gone, leaving behind a damaged but healing world. The heavy bunker door closed behind them with a solid thunk, sealing out the poisoned air. But for the first time in generations, the people inside were not just hiding from the surface world. They were preparing to reclaim it. Captain Yoon Dae-ho stood in the observation deck of the massive ship Perseverance, watching the endless stars through the thick glass window. He had been born on this ship 43 years ago, just like his father and grandfather before him. The steel corridors and humming engines were the only home he had ever known. The ship was enormous, stretching over 2 kilometers from front to back. It housed nearly 50,000 people in its belly, all descendants of the humans who had escaped Earth during the first days of the alien invasion. The Perseverance was just one ship in a fleet of 47 vessels that had been wandering the outer edges of the galaxy for over 2 centuries. "Captain," called Navigation Officer Song Mina from her station, "we are receiving that transmission from Earth again. The signal is definitely human." Dae-ho closed his eyes and listened to the crackling voice that had changed everything 3 months ago. Commander Lee Hana's message had traveled across the vast emptiness of space to reach them, carrying news that seemed impossible. There were still humans alive on Earth. For generations, the fleet had assumed their home planet was dead. They had built new lives among the stars, moving constantly to avoid detection by the Kethmari patrols. The children learned about Earth from old books and faded pictures, but it had become more legend than reality. "Sir," Mina continued, "Admiral Baek is calling for an emergency meeting of all ship captains." Dae-ho nodded and made his way to the communication center. The room was filled with screens showing the faces of the other fleet commanders. These men and women had been born in space, raised on stories of their lost homeworld, and trained to fight an enemy that seemed unbeatable. Admiral Baek Soo-jin appeared on the main screen, her gray hair pulled back severely, and her dark eyes serious. She commanded the flagship Endurance and had been leading the fleet for 20 years. "Captains," she began without ceremony, "our scouts have returned from the inner systems with important news. The Kethmari forces have been pulling back from several sectors. They appear to be concentrating their fleets around their core worlds." Captain Im Ga-eun of the Defiance leaned forward. "What does this mean for us?" "It means they have grown comfortable," replied Admiral Baek. "They believe they have eliminated all threats. They think we are extinct." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For over 200 years, the human fleet had hidden in the dark spaces between stars, scavenging resources and avoiding contact with any other species. They had become ghosts, surviving on scraps and hope. But they had not been idle. Every ship in the fleet had workshops where engineers studied captured Kethmari technology. They had learned how the alien weapons worked, discovered weaknesses in their armor, and found ways to turn their own tools against them. The children of the fleet grew up knowing every detail of enemy ship designs and battle tactics. "We have been preparing for this moment since the day we fled Earth," continued the Admiral. "Our scientists have developed weapons that can pierce their shields. Our pilots have trained in combat simulations for their entire lives. We know their language, their customs, and their fears." Captain Shin Dong-min of the Retribution spoke up. "But Admiral, we are talking about going back to Earth. That journey will take us through the heart of Kethmari space. Even if we survive, what will we find there?" Dae-ho thought about the message from Commander Hana. The woman's voice had been strong despite the static, filled with determination rather than despair. "We will find our people," he said, "and we will find a world that needs our help to heal." Though discussion continued for hours. Some captains worried about the risks of leaving their safe hiding places in the outer rim. Others argued that this was their chance to finally strike back at the aliens who had destroyed their civilization. Dr. Kang Mi-young, the fleet's chief scientist, presented her latest research. The Kethanolar have been expanding rapidly across the galaxy, she explained. Our intelligence suggests they have enslaved at least 17 different species. They follow the same pattern everywhere: invade, exterminate, or enslave the population, strip the planet of resources, then move on, just like they did to us, whispered Captain Park Hyunwoo of the Vengeance. Exactly, Dr. Kang replied. But here is the important part. They leave behind garrison forces and automated systems. If we can coordinate attacks across multiple systems, we can free dozens of worlds before they realize what is happening. Admiral Beck called for a vote. One by one, each captain gave their answer. The decision was unanimous. After more than 2 centuries of hiding, humanity was going home. As the meeting ended, Daeho returned to the observation deck. The stars looked different now, no longer cold and distant, but full of possibility. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting. Somewhere in the darkness, other enslaved species were hoping for freedom. He activated the ship's communication system and spoke to the 50,000 people living in the corridors and chambers below him. Attention all crew and passengers. This is your captain. We have received word from Earth. Our people survive. We are going home. The cheers that echoed through the ship's halls could be heard for hours. Children who had only dreamed of blue skies and green grass would finally see the world their ancestors had described. Adults who had spent their lives in exile would walk on solid ground. The great ships of humanity began to turn toward the inner galaxy, their engines burning bright against the cosmic dark. The long journey home had begun. The massive ships of the human fleet appeared in Earth's orbit like silver giants awakening from a long sleep. General Oh Tai-yang stood on the observation platform of the rebuilt Seoul Command Center, watching through binoculars as the vessels took their positions around the planet. Each ship was larger than the biggest buildings that had once stood in the old city. "How many people?" he asked his aide, Major Jung Hye-rim. "Nearly 2 million souls, sir," she replied, reading from her tablet. 47 ships total. They have been living in space for over 200 years. Tai-yang lowered his binoculars and shook his head in amazement. When Commander Lee Hana had first reported contact with the space fleet, he had imagined a few thousand survivors at most. The reality was far beyond his wildest hopes. Below ground, the work of awakening continued. Every day brought new discoveries as teams opened bunkers that had been sealed since the invasion. The complex beneath the Australian desert had yielded the greatest treasure of all, a complete database of everything humanity had learned about their alien oppressors during the early years of the war. Dr. Kim Sora emerged from the elevator, carrying a datapad filled with information that made her hands shake with excitement. "General, you need to see this," she said breathlessly. "The Kethmari have a critical weakness in their power systems. If we can disrupt the energy flow to their main reactors, their entire ship becomes powerless." Admiral Baek Soo-jin had come down from her flagship to meet with the Earth survivors. The woman was smaller than Tae-yang had expected, but her eyes held the hardness of someone who had never known peace. She studied the technical data with the intensity of a predator examining its prey. "This matches what our own scientists discovered," she said. "But we never had enough ships to test it in real combat. How many vessels can Earth contribute to the fleet?" "We have been building in secret for 50 years, Tae-yang replied. 130 ships, most of them designed specifically to fight the Kethmari. Our engineers used salvaged alien technology to create weapons they have never seen before." The meeting was interrupted by Captain Yoon Dae-ho, who entered the room with urgency written across his face. "Admiral, we have received a coded transmission from the Veltari resistance on Kepler 442b. They are requesting immediate assistance." Admiral Bayek looked confused. "The Veltari? I have never heard of them." Dr. Kang Mi-young, who had joined them from the fleet, pulled up a holographic display showing the galaxy. "They are a reptilian species that has been fighting the Kethmari for over 50 years. Our scouts made contact with them last year. They have been very helpful in providing intelligence about enemy positions." The display showed dozens of star systems marked in red, indicating Kethmari control. But scattered among them were small blue dots, worlds where resistance movements were still active. "General," said Commander Lee Hanna, who had been promoted to lead the combined ground forces, "we have similar contact with 12 other species. The Zephyrians from Wolf 359, the crystalline beings from Vega Prime, even some scattered groups of the original inhabitants of Alpha Centauri." Tae-Yang studied the map with growing excitement. "You mean we are not alone in this fight?" "Far from it," Admiral Bike replied. "The Kethmari have made enemies across the galaxy. Every species they have enslaved or attempted to destroy has survivors hiding somewhere, waiting for a chance to strike back." Major Jung Hye-rim had been working with the fleet's tactical officers to develop a comprehensive battle plan. She activated a three-dimensional display that showed troop movements and supply lines spanning dozens of star systems. "If we coordinate our attacks properly," she explained, "we can hit 17 different Kethmari installations simultaneously. They will not know where to send their reinforcements." Dr. Sora pointed to a cluster of systems near the galactic core. "The key is their communication network. If we can disrupt their ability to coordinate between systems, each garrison will be fighting alone." Captain Park Juno, who had been working with the space-borne humans to integrate their technologies, added his own observations. "The fleet has developed something called quantum jammers. They can block Kethmari communications across entire star systems." As the planning continued, more reports arrived from around Earth. The bunker complex in what had once been Russia had awakened with 300,000 survivors and a fully functional weapons manufacturing facility. The underwater cities near the former Japanese islands had preserved advanced submarine technology that could operate in the methane seas of alien worlds. Even more encouraging were the reports from other species. The Veltari had managed to capture an entire Kethmari supply depot, complete with detailed maps of enemy positions. The Zephyrians had developed a biological weapon that could disable Kethmari soldiers without killing them. "This is not just about revenge anymore," Admiral Beck said as the meeting drew to a close. "We have a chance to free dozens of worlds and prevent the Kethmari from destroying anyone else." General Tae-Yang looked around the room at the faces of humans who had survived the unthinkable and aliens who had risked everything to resist their oppressors. "How long do we need to prepare?" 6 months, replied Commander Hanna. 6 months, to coordinate with all our allies, position our forces and ensure that when we strike it will be decisive. Outside the windows of the command center, the great ships continued their orbital dance while smaller vessels moved between them, carrying supplies and personnel. On the surface below, construction crews worked around the clock to prepare launch facilities for the hundreds of ships that would soon depart for the most ambitious military campaign in galactic history. The storm was gathering, and at its center stood humanity, no longer the victims of genocide, but the leaders of a coalition that would reshape the galaxy forever. The first attack came like lightning in the darkness. Kethmari Outpost Gamma 7 was a fortress that had never been challenged in its 50 years of operation. The alien soldiers inside were eating their evening meal when the lights suddenly went out. Colonel An Jae-won led his team through the ventilation systems of the outpost, moving in complete silence. The humans had studied these facilities for decades, memorizing every corridor and knowing every weakness. They dropped through ceiling panels like shadows, their faces covered with masks that made no sound. The Kethmari soldiers were tall creatures with hard shells covering their bodies, and multiple arms that could hold several weapons at once. But their excellent eyesight was useless in the darkness, and their hearing could not detect the special boots the humans wore. One by one, the aliens fell unconscious as the human soldiers used sleep weapons that sent them into deep dreams. No, killing was necessary. The humans had learned that dead enemies became martyrs, but sleeping enemies became examples. "All clear," Jae-won whispered into his radio. Beginning data extraction. Dr. Kim Sora and her team of technicians moved through the facility like ghosts, copying every file and communication record they could find. The Kethmari had kept detailed records of their operations across 17 different star systems. "Colonel," Sora said excitedly, They have the locations of every prison camp in this sector. Thousands of aliens from different species, all being held for slave labor. Download everything, J1 replied. We will free them all. Meanwhile, 3 star systems away, Captain Yoon Dae-ho was leading a different kind of mission. The Kethmari command ship orbiting Proxima Centauri b was massive, nearly as large as a human city. But size meant nothing when the enemy did not know you were coming. The human boarding ships attached themselves to the alien vessel like metal spiders, cutting through the hull with tools that made no sound. Dae-ho stepped into the command center, where the Kethmari captain stood surrounded by his officers. The alien was even taller than most of his species, with decorative metal plates attached to his shell that showed his high rank. His compound eyes reflected the emergency lighting as he stared at the humans in shock. "This is impossible," he said through the translation device. "Humans are extinct. We destroyed your world centuries ago." "Your intelligence was wrong," Dae-ho replied calmly. "We are very much alive, and we have come to collect what you owe us." The Kethmari captain clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter or fear. "You are only 12 soldiers. This ship carries 3,000 warriors." "Your warriors are currently unconscious," Dae-ho informed him. "Our sleep gas has been flowing through your air system for the past 10 minutes. You are the last one awake." As if to prove his point, the alien captain's legs began to wobble and his eyes grew dim. He collapsed to the floor with a sound like falling rocks. Lieutenant Colonel Seo Hanul was coordinating the liberation of the Zephyrian homeworld on the other side of the galaxy. The blue-skinned Zephyrians had been enslaved for over 30 years, forced to work in mines that stripped their planet of precious metals. "This is incredible," whispered Elder Zephtala as human ships landed in the capital city. "We had given up hope of ever seeing freedom again." "Hope never dies," Hanul replied through her translator. "It just waits for the right moment to return." The Zephyrian people emerged from their underground hiding places, blinking in the sunlight they had not seen in decades. Children who had been born in captivity saw the sky for the first time. Adults who had spent years in mines felt grass beneath their feet. "How can we repay this gift?" asked the elder. "Help us free the others," Hanul said simply. "There are 16 more worlds that need liberation." The pattern repeated across the galaxy. Human ships appeared without warning at Kethmari installations, moving with precision that came from centuries of planning. They struck communication centers, supply depots, prison camps, and command bases. The aliens who had ruled through fear for 3,000 years suddenly found themselves helpless. Their technology was useless against enemies who knew every weakness. Their superior numbers meant nothing when they could not stay awake to fight. Captain Shin Dongmin stood in the ruins of the Kethmari industrial complex at Wolf 359, watching alien factories burn in the distance. The fires were carefully controlled, designed to destroy war materials while leaving the planet's environment unharmed. "All stations. This is Captain Shin broadcasting on all frequencies," he announced. "This is humanity. We have returned. The age of Kethmari oppression is ending. To all enslaved peoples, freedom is coming. To all oppressors, justice is coming." The message was picked up by communication arrays across dozens of star systems. In hidden rebel bases, enslaved populations heard the words and felt hope returning to their hearts. In Kethmari command centers, military leaders heard the words and felt fear for the first time in centuries. Back on Earth, General Otai Yang watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Every mission was succeeding beyond their wildest expectations. The Kethmari military was in complete confusion, unable to understand how their extinct enemies had returned with such devastating effectiveness. "Admiral," he said to Baek-Soo-jin, "we have liberated 43 installations in the past week. The enemy is in full retreat." "Good," the Admiral replied. "But this is only the beginning. We still have the hardest target ahead of us." On the tactical display, a single star system glowed red at the center of the galaxy. Kethanolar, the Kethmari homeworld, had never been attacked in 3,000 years of galactic conquest. That was about to change. The Kethmari homeworld of Kethanolar had never seen enemy ships in its skies. For 3,000 years, It had been the safe heart of a vast empire, protected by layers of defense that had never been tested in real battle. The planet was beautiful in a cold way, with crystal cities that reached toward purple clouds and silver oceans that reflected twin suns. Admiral Bayek Su-jin stood on the bridge of the flagship New Earth, watching the massive fleet emerge from hyperspace around the alien world. She counted over 2,000 ships from 23 different species, all flying together under the banner of Liberation. "All vessels, this is Admiral Bayek," she announced over the communication system. "Today, we do not come as destroyers. We come to bring justice." The Kethmari defense fleet rushed to meet them, but it was too late. Decades of studying enemy technology had given the coalition forces every advantage they needed. Human quantum jammers blocked alien communications, while Zephyrian ion cannons disabled their weapons. The Veltari used their knowledge of Kethmari psychology to predict exactly where the enemy ships would try to run. General Lihana led the ground assault with a mixed force of humans and aliens working side by side. They landed in the crystal capital city, where the Kethmari High Council had ruled the galaxy for centuries. The alien leaders had never imagined that anyone would dare attack their sacred world. The fighting was brief but decisive. The Kethmari soldiers found their weapons useless against enemies who knew every weakness in their armor. Their communication systems failed when human hackers took control of their networks. Their energy shields collapsed when Dr. Kim Sora's team activated the frequency disruptors they had spent years perfecting. Colonel Park Subin coordinated the orbital strikes that disabled the planetary defense grid without harming the civilian population below. Each target was chosen carefully, designed to stop resistance while preserving the planet's infrastructure and natural beauty. Within hours, the Kethmari High Council was surrounded in their crystalline council chamber. The alien leaders stood in a circle, their tall forms casting strange shadows in the colored light that filtered through the walls. They had ruled over billions of lives, deciding which species lived and which died. But now they looked small and afraid. "This cannot be happening," clicked the Supreme Counselor, the largest of the aliens. "We are the masters of this galaxy. We have eliminated 47 species. We destroyed your pathetic world." "You tried to destroy us," replied General Hana quietly. "But we survived, and we remembered everything you did." Judge Advocate Kim Young-soo stepped forward with a datapad containing evidence that had been gathered from across the galaxy. "You are charged with the genocide of 47 intelligent species, the enslavement of billions of beings, and the attempted extinction of humanity." The trials began immediately in the Great Council chamber, broadcast across the galaxy so that every species could see justice being done. Witnesses came from dozens of worlds to tell their stories. Zephyrian children spoke about watching their parents die in alien mines. Veltari soldiers described the destruction of their sacred cities. Human survivors from Earth shared memories passed down through generations of suffering. The evidence was overwhelming. For 3,000 years, the Kethmari had followed the same pattern on world after world. They would arrive with promises of peace, then demand resources and labor. When the local population resisted, the aliens would begin systematic elimination of anyone who opposed them. "We were only following our nature," the Supreme Counselor said in his defense. "The strong rule the weak. This is the way of the universe." "No," replied Dr. Kang Mi-young, who had studied the Kethmari for decades. "This is the way of tyrants. The universe is large enough for all species to live in peace." The sentencing took place under the light of both suns, with representatives from every liberated world present to witness the moment. The punishment was exile to a barren moon with basic survival equipment but no technology. The Kethmari leaders would spend the rest of their lives learning what it meant to struggle for survival. "This is not revenge," Admiral Beck explained to the galaxy. "This is justice. We do not become monsters to defeat monsters." Commander Yu Ji-hoon stood 5 years later in the observation deck of the orbital station above Earth, watching ships launch toward the stars. The planet below showed green continents and blue oceans, with cities rising from the ruins of the old world. The yellow poison in the sky had cleared, replaced by the clean blue that humans had dreamed about for centuries. Status report, he requested from his aide, Ensign Han So-young. All 23 liberated worlds report stable governments, she replied, reading from her tablet. The Galactic Protection Treaty has been signed by 41 species. The patrol fleets are operational and ready. The treaty was humanity's greatest achievement. Every species that had suffered under Kethmari rule had agreed to work together to prevent such horrors from happening again. Mixed crews of humans, Zephyrians, Veltari, and others patrolled the galaxy, watching for any signs of aggression or oppression. Through the viewport, Ji-hoon could see a group of Kethmari civilians working alongside humans in the orbital shipyards. Not all of the aliens had supported their government's policies of genocide. Many had been horrified to learn what had been done in their name, and now worked to help rebuild the galaxy their leaders had nearly destroyed. A message came through the communication system from Captain Park Juno, who was leading a patrol near the Outer Rim. New Earth Station, this is the HSS Guardian. We have made contact with a previously unknown species called the Makari. They report no hostile contact, requesting cultural exchange specialists. Ji-hoon smiled and authorized the mission. This was what the galaxy could be when species worked together instead of trying to destroy each other. The darkness that had fallen over so many worlds was finally lifting, replaced by the light of cooperation and hope. Somewhere among the distant stars, human ships continued their eternal patrol, carrying a simple message to anyone who might threaten: the peace. We are humanity. We remember what it means to suffer. We will not let it happen again.